Because you're taking kids that are coming from some chaotic situations in the morning, and then you're putting them into environments that continue to lend themselves to a bit of that chaos. And so if you can change the way that you greet children in the morning, I always, in my professional developments, talk about how we greet kids. And so we'll get the meanest person we can find to work the breakfast. And we're like, this person is like yelling at them from the time, get over here and get your tray, do this, and they're like so frazzled.
You start the day off with a little anxiety,
the day off.
huh?
And then they have the nerve to say, have a good day. And you're like, I can't,
You just yelled at me.
You just yelled at me. I'm so frazzled. I don't know what to do.
My name is Alex Lopez with Courtney Clark Architects and Issues in Education. With me is Dr. Marsha Herron from Oklahoma. You're a consultant for the Oklahoma State Board Association. Did I get that right?
Oklahoma State School Boards Association.
Oklahoma State School Boards Association.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is.
How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Thank you for coming. Beautiful Miami. So
Yeah.
absolutely, we get some good weather here. So tell me a little bit about where you got started. Somewhere in New York.
Yeah, actually, I was a special education teacher in District 75, which is the citywide special ed district. I happily accepted a position as a New York City teaching fellow. And I always say, I didn't choose special ed, it chose me. And then people are like, oh, and I'm like, no. They sent me a letter and said, you're going to be a special ed teacher.
This is it.
Like, okay. It was an extreme pleasure to work in District 75 because that is the area where you have the most severe exceptionalities. And so my kids were elementary K through 5, and they had severe emotional and behavioral disorders. I mean, it was almost sad when you thought about children
so all the struggles.
Yeah,
right?
it's
And
like severe trauma.
It's kids with special needs,
Absolutely.
correct? And I'm sure you were bitten, punched, kicked.
Oh, never. Like, I don't play that. So, and I think the kids knew that. I was the science teacher, and it was really like walking in the first day and the principal saying, you're going to teach science, you're going to teach kindergarten, you're going to teach ESL. Do you speak Spanish? You're going to. And so when we got our assignments, I was told I was the science teacher, that the teacher before me did not really do very much. There's a 4th grade science test for the first time. So good luck to you. And we have these 3 workbooks.
Sink or swim, huh?
Yeah. And, when I was in science, and I had some really phenomenal science teachers, one in particular that's been with me through my whole life, still to this day, she never used a workbook. So I didn't intend to do it for my kids. And for 2 years, my school was able to post the highest test scores of any non-agency
That's wonderful.
school.
So these were some of your formative years as an educator.
Absolutely, like my first and second year as an educator, posting those test scores. And so that caught the attention of one of the regional instruction supervisors who came to see me. And then she enrolled me in this program that was held on the campus of CCNY. And I just got access to all of these resources. And so that really started the journey, I think, for me, in saying we need to connect people to resources.
Absolutely. And so now you fast forward a few months. Right?
Yeah.
And now you're working for one of the largest state associations in the state of Oklahoma. So tell me a little bit about your consulting and what you do there.
Absolutely. So prior to that role, I've had the opportunity to serve in higher ed. I was the Dean of the School of Education for the only HBCU, Langston University. And so really looking at under-resourced students, students who were coming to us with just their suitcase, which is the beauty and the power of the HBCU. And then I transitioned to work for the largest school district, Oklahoma City Public Schools, as their Chief of Equity and Student Support. And so within that position, I made a decision that we would not just serve children, right? Because we can do all we can within the boundaries of the school day, and then the kids go home, and then they go home on break. And so if we're not putting any resources with the families, then what are we really doing? We're just spinning our wheels. And so in a division where you had people who had worked for, 20 plus years, some of them 30 years, I asked them to reconsider what their jobs actually were, because you can't keep doing the same thing over and over and then expecting different results,
That's
right?
the definition of insanity.
Definition of insanity. So change the mission and the vision to be the same thing, which was service above all else. We are going to serve children and families, regardless of adult issues, regardless of, these barriers, either perceived or actual barriers.
That is phenomenal, because what I see, my wife's an educator, my daughter's an educator, and I see that connection with your formative years, right? You put the children first, right? It's children with special needs, and now you're using that background for everybody.
Absolutely. Nowhere in any field other than special ed do you find such inequities, And so what's good for children with exceptionalities is good for every child. And the great thing about children with exceptionalities is they do come with funding. But what about every other child, right? Mm-hmm. So focusing on improving service delivery, really identifying who your target areas are. I'm in a state where they make laws against equity, diversity, inclusion. Mm-hmm. And so what happens when that work still has to be done, but you can't call it that work? Mm-hmm. You tend toward other things. So in my current position, created the central tenets for the work, right? So that really looks like attending to student differences. It looks like maximizing fairness and increasing the sense of student belongingness. And the reason why we focus on those is because we identified under-resourced students, which is really a higher ed term. And so once I borrowed that term and did the research around it, it is students who face persistent and prolonged situations in various environments that cause gaps in their basic needs, which create barriers to academic achievement.
I really like that word that you use, exceptionality. I had never heard it used in that way, but it's more than just the special ed
Absolutely.
Kids, right? It's everybody that, especially in architecture, which is what we do. I know we talked a little bit off camera as to what would be important in a classroom. What would you change? And can you tell me a little bit about, maybe the lighting in the classroom?
Absolutely. So, it's really difficult. I think most schools are shifting away from the old fluorescent lights, those that have the bond issues to do so, and nesting the lights up in the ceiling tiles. And you don't get the hum like you used to, because you're using LED lights and those kinds of things, but you still get the brightness. And so in every classroom that I've ever taught in, one thing, and even in my office, when people walk in my office, they're like, oh my God, it's so calming, because I took out the lights, I closed the shades, and then I put up floor lamps. So every time a child walked into my room, it was just like, I'm calm,
It was very calm.
Right.
So nowadays, what we're doing as architects in most rooms that are required is we put color tuning lights and dimmable lights, so you can change the color temperature and change the lighting level. So that is that's very good to know.
Absolutely.
And hear that it's being used and needed.
Yes, very much needed.
Absolutely.
Because you're taking kids that are coming from some chaotic situations in the morning, and then you're putting them into environments that continue to lend themselves to a bit of that chaos. And so if you can change the way that you greet children in the morning, I always, in my professional developments, talk about how we greet kids. And so we'll get the meanest person we can find to work the breakfast. And we're like, this person is like yelling at them from the time, get over here, get your tray, do this, and they're like so frazzled.
You start the day off with a little anxiety,
the day off.
huh?
And then they have the nerve to say, have a good day. And you're like, I can't,
You just yelled at me.
You just yelled at me. I'm so frazzled. I don't know what to do. So
okay, so lighting's a big deal.
Lighting
in
is
special
huge.
education.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us, Dr. Herron. All right, congratulations. That's a lot of work. So
I'm up for the challenge.
absolutely.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Take care.
Appreciate it.